Einen wunderschönen guten Abend, liebe Zuschauerinnen und Zuschauer, sehr verehrte Damen und Herren. Ich möchte Sie im Namen des Heine Hardcore Verlages zu einem ganz besonderen Abend, einem ganz besonderen Schmankerl begrüßen. Wir begrüßen heute Lucy Anne Holmes, die Autorin eines ganz besonderen Buches, das in Englisch den Titel Women on Top of the World trug und im Deutschen Was wir lieben heißt, ist gerade erschienen. Es ist ein Thema, was uns alle angeht, als Frauen, als Männer, als erwachsene Menschen. Es geht um Sexualität, weibliche Sexualität, aber auf eine wirklich ganz andere Art und Weise, wie wir es normalerweise vielleicht schon gelesen haben oder kennen. Ich möchte deswegen gleich anregen, wer sich berufen fühlt, wer Fragen hat an Lucy Anne, kann die gerne hier reinschreiben. Und zwar haben wir da so ein kleines Videofenster, also unter dem Videofenster ein kleines Eingabefeld, so rum. Da können Sie gerne entweder Ihren Namen, also mit Namensangabe oder auch anonym reinschreiben, was Ihnen auf der Seele brennt, was Sie gerne wissen möchten. Das können Sie auf Deutsch oder Englisch, ganz wie Sie möchten. Und wir werden uns dann bemühen, Ihre Fragen bei Zeiten einfach mit in unseren Chat hineinzunehmen. Und ich werde Sie dann direkt an Lucy Anne weiterleiten. Ich werde versuchen, das so gut wie es geht, auch Deutsch und Englisch zu machen. Ich bin keine professionelle Übersetzerin, aber ich glaube, wir kriegen das trotzdem hin. Ich werde versuchen zusammenzufassen, was ich Lucy frage und was sie mir antwortet. Und wie gesagt, wenn Sie weitere Fragen haben, dann bitte zögern Sie nicht. Ich freue mich sehr, Sie damit einzubeziehen. Gut. Very warm welcome, Lucy.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Good to see a wonderful glitzy dress.
Thank you.
And I was really, I'm really honored that I'm the one to talk to you tonight because your book is so special. I think all of us may have read other books before where women talk about their sexuality, even in a candid, in a very free way. But then again, normally it's women in their 30s, it's Western women, it's heterosexual women. And what makes your book so special for me and maybe for most of the readers is that the women, the 51 women around the world you interviewed come from so many different walks of life, and they are between age 19 and I think 70, and they are mostly heterosexual, but of course there are queer women, queer persons in the book, not only white, pretty, able-bodied women, and this is what makes it so special. So my first question would be, was that a concept you had in mind from the beginning, that you wanted this kind of inclusive idea about this book, and how did you come up with the idea in the first place to write this book?
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. I'm so excited that this book is out in Germany. So yeah, thank you to everybody who's making this happen. It's just such a lovely journey. Yes, so I can't take the credit for this amazing idea. I was approached by a really wonderful editor in England called Katie Folane, and it was her idea. And I think I'd just written a memoir about sex, and I'd done a campaign against Page 3, and I think she knew I was comfortable with the subject matter and coming from a quite a feminist sort of standpoint. And so she approached me, and it's just been such an honor. Like, I tend to think I'm quite an idea-y person, I'm always having ideas of things I want to write, and then this idea just was given to me, and it's just been such a gift. And I didn't know if I could do it. I've never done interviews before. So I did a few interviews to see how it was. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I just love this so much. And yeah, it's been a beautiful journey. So it's all credit to Katie and this wonderful idea. And yes, I mean, and she very much wanted it to be women from around the world. So, and I just love this sense of this international feel. And yes, and we did have discussions. We really wanted it to feel inclusive. And also, sex is so different I think one wonderful thing about the book is each story, sex can look quite different from person to person. And yes, and to really reflect that people's relationships are different. Many aren't in relationships. So for many women, it's a self-pleasure. And so we did want it to be as inclusive as possible. So it's been a joy to talk to all these incredible women.
Okay, thank you very much. Ich werde das auf Deutsch einmal kurz zusammenfassen. Lucy sagt, die Idee für dieses Buch, die ist ihr nicht etwa alleine gekommen, sondern sie verdankt da sehr viel ihrer Verlegerin, die auf sie zugekommen ist. Man muss dazu vielleicht sagen, Lucy Anne Holmes ist in ihrer Heimat überhaupt keine Unbekannte. Im Gegenteil, sie wurde vor einigen Jahren von der BBC zu einer der bedeutendsten, einflussreichsten Frauen Großbritanniens gewählt. Sie ist nicht nur Autorin, sondern sie hat sich auch einen Namen gemacht, schon vor 10 Jahren in einer Kampagne gegen die Seite 3 Fotos der Sun, also eines großen britischen Boulevardblattes. Das kennen wir hier in Deutschland vielleicht, die barbusigen Seite 3 Mädchen in der Bild-Zeitung waren ja was Ähnliches, und sie hat sich damals mit anderen Frauen dagegen eingesetzt, dass diese Bilder so in der Form weiter gezeigt werden. Das heißt, sie ist also eine sehr streitbare Person, und sie hatte selbst ein Memoir, also eine Art Sachbuch, ein erzählendes Sachbuch über ihre eigene sexuelle Geschichte geschrieben. Von daher wusste die Verlegerin schon genau, wen sie da anspricht. Und Lucy Anne sagt, sie war anfänglich ein bisschen, sie wusste nicht genau, sie fand die Idee toll, so ein inklusives Buch, so ein internationales Buch zu machen. Und gleichzeitig sagt sie, sie hat vorher nie Interviews geführt, sondern sie hat dann erstmal so eine Art Probebohrung gemacht und mit ein paar Leuten gesprochen, um herauszufinden, ob das überhaupt was für sie sein könnte. Und das finde ich so interessant, da stelle ich ihr gleich die nächste Frage. Lucy, I just told the audience that you did some interviews just to make sure you could do it, because you told me just you had never done these kind of interviews before. I think it's incredible because people opened up to you so much. So you definitely succeeded, or more than that. But what I'm curious about, how did you find all these different women? How did you approach them, or did they approach you? And how did you get in touch on such an intimate basis, so they really opened up to you? How did you do it?
Yeah, it's beautiful actually to think about, because each woman had a particular journey, and actually it's interesting that these are the 51 women, because I actually had probably conversations or email exchanges or messaging with probably the same amount of people again, and for various reasons they thought they might like to do an interview, and then actually when it came down to it they weren't so sure. So some people sort of came close and then decided not to. So I started. What was really wonderful about it is I realized how international my community was, and also the communities around me. If I think my son's at a school and there's so many nationalities at that school, and my having traveled or lived abroad, or just having a sort of quite a diverse section of friends, and it was very interesting then collectively their networks, how international we are. Because I had thought at the beginning, I'll never find somebody here, and very quickly I spoke to someone in Iran, and I thought, oh gosh, I hadn't dreamt that would happen so quickly. So I started off just sort of sharing it on personal pages, and then so from that got a lot of people quite quickly. It was probably it was interesting, like I could have filled it with easily 50 British women, so, and also and I think the German women, certain sort of areas in Europe, women were quite keen to speak, and then there were other territories where it was a lot harder to find women. I really wanted to speak to someone in Japan, and actually I spoke to this wonderful young woman called White Tulip, and I think she might actually have been one of my last interviews, and there was a real journey to speak to someone in Japan. And I had a team of of Japanese women who were saying, it's not for us, it's not for me, but we're really going to help you find somebody. And I think you have to, much as I wanted the book to be diverse, at the end of the day you can't, for many people it's such a vulnerable thing to share, and culturally we might not feel that we should be sharing. Also, we might be in relationships and we feel we don't want to share. Like many women were like, I'd like to do it, but I just couldn't. I would feel like I shouldn't do it because of my partner. So Yeah, so but what was so lovely is I had many champions. So I had many people like these Japanese women who said, although it's not for me, I'd love somebody from my home country to speak, so I'm going to do what I can to help you. I really wanted the voice of a trans woman in the book, and again, that was a slow journey for me to find somebody, a trans woman who would talk to me. And I feel really lucky that I spoke to a wonderful non-binary person called Cal, who's and they're in their early 20s, and they approached me saying, oh, I really like talking about sex. You know, I don't identify as a woman, but I do identify with womanhood. And they really explained to me, just, in fact, I'm not gonna paraphrase Cal, so I'll just read a little bit from, this is the English version, this is your beautiful German version, and this is my pink English version. So yeah, so this is Cal, who's 23, from the UK, and they said, I don't identify as a woman, but I do identify with womanhood. Sex holds a lot of significance for me, and I'm sure it does for other trans people too. We are sharing our bodies with someone else in such an intimate way. It's an emotional space. It's one of the only spaces where I feel like I am seen as I am. And I really felt, having spoken to them, this vulnerability of this place for them, and talking about it. And then as the book, as I was going along with my interviews, and I was struggling to talk to someone, a trans woman, you know, I was aware that, you know, it's not for everybody to trust me and to trust that their words going in a book about this. So I kind of had to be like, gosh, well, I can't make this happen, much as I really would love this a trans woman's voice to be in it. And I had so many people helping me in different communities, and eventually this wonderful woman, Jennifer, approached me and said, and I had just so much respect for Jennifer, because she emailed me again and again, asking about the project, asking about me. She'd really sort of done a bit of research on me, and she said, you know, I can see why I know that many trans women, they don't like to talk about sexuality except with other trans women. And so, but I feel that I could do this, so I'm gonna do it. Okay. So yeah, so each woman, yeah, I'd say, had a different journey to me, but yeah, and thank you to all the people who helped.
Yeah, let's interrupt you for a second at this in this moment, because otherwise I forget all the interesting details.
Oh, sorry, I'm going on and on.
Also ich versuche es mal kurz zusammenzufassen, was Lucy Anne mir hier über ihre Reise mit diesem Buch erzählt. Sie hat also, sagte ja schon, sie war zunächst skeptisch, ob sie diese Frauen finden würde. Sie sagt, es war ihr klar, dass sie britische Frauen, deutsche Frauen finden würde, Nordeuropäerinnen, die sich vielleicht wohler damit fühlen, über Sexualität zu sprechen, aber eben gerade eher sensible Bereiche wie zum Beispiel Transmenschen oder auch Menschen aus ganz anderen Kulturen wie Japan. Das war ihr wichtig, dass sie die auch in dem Buch, dass die auch eine Stimme bekommen in dem Buch. Und dann hat es sich wohl wie so eine Art Schneeballsystem entwickelt, so wie es Lucy hier erzählt. Also sie hat selbst auf ihren Webpages, auf ihren Social Media Pages ihre Suchaufrufe gestartet. Sie hat dann gemerkt, dass sie in einer sehr internationalen Community eigentlich unterwegs ist, über die Schule ihres Sohnes, über alle möglichen Bekannten und Freunde auf allen Kontinenten. Und immer wieder hat sie auch erlebt, dass Menschen ihr dann geholfen haben, die selber gesagt haben, ich möchte vielleicht nicht meine Geschichte erzählen, ich fühle mich damit nicht so wohl, aber ich helfe dir, Menschen zu finden, die dir die Geschichte erzählen. Und es hört sich nach so einem ganz tollen Frauennetzwerk an, das sich dadurch gebildet hat, wo dann eben Menschen das Vertrauen gefasst haben, teilweise in intensiven Vorgesprächen, E-Mail-Austausch mit ihr zu sprechen. Lucy, how long did it all take from the first idea until you finally published the book, first in Britain in spring and now in Germany?
Yeah, it was really quick, I feel. So I think it was just over a year. actually from idea to from me getting, you know, starting to it being published, as I'd say it was a year and 3 months, so quite quick. And what was really wonderful working with Katie is I would send interviews as you know, rather than send the whole manuscript, I sent interviews, stories, so she'd had quite a lot early. Yeah, but it was still quite quick.
Ungefähr ein Jahr und 3 Monate hat das Projekt gedauert von der ersten Idee bis zur Veröffentlichung, was aber auch daran lag, dass sie das portionsweise an ihre Verlegerin weiterreichen konnte und nicht erst alles fertig schreiben musste. Und sie sagte auch, es sind eigentlich etwa doppelt so viele Gespräche geführt worden. Sie hat jetzt diese 51 Frauen in dem Buch, aber es hätten auch einfach doppelt so viele sein können, wobei immer wieder auch Menschen dann doch einen Rückzieher gemacht haben oder gesagt haben, sie finden es interessant, aber wollen dann doch nicht auf diese Weise sich öffnen oder möchten nicht, dass ihr Partner das liest. Also es war eine Menge Vorarbeit, was man merkt, was drinsteckt. Ich werde Sie auch gleich nochmal näher fragen nach diesen Geschichten von trans- und queeren Personen, weil ich das sehr spannend finde. Es sind aber noch andere Dinge in dem Buch, die mir aufgefallen sind. Lucy, I just said that there were some things that were striking for me, not only the topic of queerness, which we'll come to later, but then again also a really sad aspect, because there are a lot of stories about abuse, about violence, about maybe even later in life realizing that women say, I was abused as a young girl and I didn't even know it then, because abuse comes in all shades and colors. It's not necessarily rape as we might imagine. So do you think that maybe the Me Too movement has made women more sensitive about their own personal stories and what black chapters they might have? Is it more of a topic? Were you surprised that that there are so many tales of abuse when you talk to women? How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, in a way I was surprised, but the book reflects the statistics that we know, and the statistics are high. You know, we know that you know, the World Health Organization tells us that, you know, 1 in 3 women will be raped or beaten in their lifetime. You know, that it's, you know, it's sexual violence is on a vast scale. So I think it's always, you know, just so shocking and saddening when you know, to hear these stories. Yes, I think it's sadly the thing that unites all the women. It didn't matter where they were from, but there were stories of child abuse, rape, somebody was kidnapped. You know, there were so many, and I think also how young. I say most of these stories were happening to women younger than, 16 really. And like you said, many of the women, yes, it was something that they were realizing in later life. It was coming to them in flashbacks, and there was therapy journeys. One thing I will say is that we tend to, you know, we know these statistics, and what I think is so amazing about these books is this book is that these are the women behind these statistics, and they are fabulous, complicated, wonderful women. And what I would say, the thing that also unites all these women is they are triumphant, you know, that they have had this incident that's happened, and they have, you know, in that moment they were, you know, victimized, but then they have found a way to explore, to heal and to celebrate their sexuality, and they're sharing that journey. And that the word that I kept coming up with was triumphant. I was like, gosh, that female spirit is so triumphant. Yes.
That's one great thing about your book, I think, because it shares all the details, but it's never hopeless. It's never like being in a dark place where there's no way out. Even when it comes to such a really a hard topic as feminine genital mutilation, you have a woman who said, "I survived this. I had reconstructive surgery, and now I can relive my own sexual feelings." And so there's always some kind of hope. There's always some way to cope with these experiences, and I think that's one of the really powerful messages of many messages which your book has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shortly, I translate a little and so. Es geht hier um die Frage, die mich beschäftigt hat, als ich das Buch gelesen habe. Es kommt tatsächlich in sehr vielen der Geschichten sexuelle Gewalt in allen Formen vor. Also von Belästigung bis wirklich zu auch einer harten Geschichte, wo es also auch um Genitalverstümmelung geht. Und trotzdem muss man sagen, so traurig und so schwarz diese Geschichten sind und so tief diese Frauen blicken lassen, geht es immer darum, dass sie auch diese tiefste Schwärze überwinden können und eben auch zurückfinden, auch zu irgendeiner Form von guter, lustvoller Sexualität. Und Lucy sagt, für sie ist es so eine Frage von weiblichem Triumph im Grunde, also ein Triumphieren über das zum Opfer gemacht zu werden und nicht Opfer bleiben zu wollen. Und das finde ich tatsächlich auch sehr, sehr lesenswert an dem Buch. Gleichzeitig sagt Lucy, drückt es eben auch nur die Statistik aus, die besagt, eine von 3 Frauen wird im Lauf ihres Lebens Opfer sexueller Gewalt in der einen oder anderen Form. Und letztlich sind das aber eben die Geschichten hinter dieser Statistik. Und diese Geschichten sind auch vielfältiger und letztlich eben auch häufig mutmachender als nur diese reinen traurigen Zahlen. One thing that is closely connected to the topic we were just talking about is the idea of sex education, which is very different, of course, in different cultures, in different countries. But I found it interesting that even in the very beginning of your book, there's the story of Melody. She's 19 and she's beginning to experiment sexually with her boyfriend. She's from Britain, so European culture. And still she says that maybe she doesn't really know everything she should about her body, and her boyfriend doesn't know either, and they are like absolute beginners, like most of us were when we started our sexual journeys. And so this is very relatable, this kind of story. Would you say that in general, what can we make of that? When we hear that young women, even in the 2020s, don't know enough about the anatomy, even in places like Britain, like Germany, like Netherlands, whatever, would you say there is a need for more, better, different sex education in schools, in institutions? What can women, mothers maybe give their growing daughters? What would be a good idea to deepen this sexual knowledge for young women?
Yeah, absolutely. It was again something that united all the women I spoke to, as nobody felt they'd had decent or enough, if any, sex education. And yes, and I felt that was really interesting, that Melody, you would hope, being 19, being in the UK, there is some sex ed in schools, but she felt it was really failed her, and it didn't teach her about important things like consent. And she actually ended up online on a BDSM website, and she said that's where she learned important stuff about, that she felt was really equipping her with things like expressing boundaries and consent. I mean, there was the other extreme. So the oldest woman I spoke to was 74, Lucy, in New Zealand, and she'd had no sex education at all, had a boyfriend. She was feeling quite sick one day, and her mum said, you need to go to the doctors about that flu. And her sister went, well, she's obviously pregnant. And her mum went, what, didn't you use anything? And she was like, what? You never told me what? She just hadn't thought she'd get pregnant. And, she got pregnant. She'd had no sex education at all. So the fact that then Melody could go online and there was something, so there is some improvement in certain countries, but Yes, it's still woefully lacking. So, it will. I think, you know, we still are quite uncomfortable generally talking about this subject, and I think there's so much emphasis on schools educating, and I think that's really unfair on the teacher. You know, you've got one teacher, maybe one lesson, or, you know, to have to teach however many kids. I think, you know, education has to be ongoing, and it comes from real conversations about it, about how it makes us feel, you know, not just, you know, maybe biological facts, but we do need that, but also how things make us feel, equipping us in how to express needs, you know, in really feeling autonomous about this aspect.
In this way, even your book is a kind of educational book because people express themselves, or sometimes you give them a voice to be heard, and it might improve communication.
And it's very interesting, I think, and I think this is why I'm writing another book now about sexuality, and I don't think there can be enough books about sexuality, to be honest, especially because so many of the women I spoke to, we don't talk about, because we feel we can't talk about it. So many of the women I spoke to from across the world felt they couldn't talk to their mothers. You know, they're not getting their sex education from school, and also peers, that quite often peers will tell them some, you know, there's some sort of like, you know, these sort of kind of outlandish rumors that go around, you know, particularly amongst young girls about sexuality. So actually what we'd find is that women turn to books because there aren't these conversations. They feel they can't talk, so they turn to books, and again you hear that, and it's actually a book that changes somebody's life or makes them not feel like there's something wrong with them. So yeah, so that's why I think books are really great.
Wir haben gerade über das Thema sexuelle Aufklärung im weiteren Sinne gesprochen, also nicht nur im Sinne von Eltern klären ihre Kinder auf, sondern eben über die Frage, warum selbst in westlichen Ländern in Europa es Menschen gibt, wie zum Beispiel die 19-jährige Melody, die mit ihrem Freund den ersten Sex hat oder eben die erste sexuelle Erfahrungen macht und trotzdem sagt, sie weiß eigentlich nicht wirklich genügend Bescheid über ihre eigene Anatomie und er weiß es auch nicht, und die dann schließlich auf einer BDSM-Website mehr erfährt über, worum es eigentlich in der sexuellen Kommunikation gehen sollte. Also wie finden wir Übereinstimmung, wie tauschen wir uns wirklich aus über unsere Bedürfnisse, wie setzen wir Grenzen, was wir nicht möchten. Also all diese, im Grunde diese Soft Skills, die man braucht, um guten und erfüllenden Sex zu haben, die weit hinausgehen eigentlich über anatomische Aufklärung. Und Lucy sagt auch, sie findet es unfair, wenn immer nur die Schulen in die Verantwortung genommen werden, die Lehrer, die da was tun sollen. Letztlich ist es ja viel, es sind die Peer Groups, also die Freunde, es ist das Internet, es sind Mütter, die ihren Töchtern was geben können. Und sie sagt natürlich auch, oder ich habe das gesagt, es ist natürlich auch ein Buch wie dieses, was sozusagen helfen kann, eine eigene Stimme zu finden oder sich inspirieren zu lassen davon, wie Frauen ihre Bedürfnisse und ihr Begehren ausdrücken können und vielleicht eben auch im Vergleich mit anderen etwas über sich zu erfahren. Then another thing I found interesting is, let's talk again about that sex ed topic, because there's one story which I found really moving. It's Jasmine from Palestine, who comes from well, let's say kind of macho culture where she didn't learn a lot about her own sexuality and wasn't allowed to express her desire. And now she says she has a daughter and she can teach her how to deal differently. So this is also a story of great empowerment, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jasmine's story really moved me. It was one that I think we both cried. It was really beautiful, and there were a few women I spoke to who moved me, and you know, we sort of shared a tear, and I think actually Anya, who's the German woman I spoke to, was one of them, and also White Tulip, who I mentioned in Japan, and all these women, I've called them the pattern breakers. because they, you know, should we read a bit of Jasmine's, because I think she's so incredible, her story. I've just got to find her.
Meanwhile, you find the story of Jasmine. Maybe I love the pictures.
Oh ja, great.
When you read something. Ich nehme an, dass Sie, weil ich sehe auf meiner Seite als Moderatorin, sehe ich das nicht, aber Sie haben, glaube ich, das Glück als Zuschauer zwischendrin immer wieder sehr interessante, ja auch erotische Zeichnungen und Illustrationen zu sehen. Das sind alles Zeichnungen und Illustrationen, die kommen aus diesem Buch. Die sind von verschiedenen Künstlerinnen. Ich glaube, es sind alles Frauen. They are all women artists, right? Are they all?
No, there are actually a couple of men.
So mostly, but most, also hauptsächlich weibliche Künstlerinnen, aber auch männliche. Und wir sehen hier eben immer wieder, oder Sie sehen auf Ihrer Seite, ich habe es im Buch schon gesehen, total schöne, eindringliche, außergewöhnliche Grafik, die dieses Buch natürlich auch zu einem optischen Häppchen macht. Maybe you can show one of them when you read something from Jasmine's story, but then now we go back to the topic of how women can change not only their own lives, but the life of their daughters.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the illustration that goes along with Jasmine's story. So she grew up in Palestine and is a Muslim. And she said, when I was growing up, even kisses were censored on the television. The first time I saw kissing on the lips, I asked my mother if she had ever done that with my dad. She said, no, that's not good. You might catch something. There was a lot of you might catch something and stranger danger, even with myself. Mum and the teachers at school recommended that you get changed as quickly as possible in case you found yourself naked. So I was 15 or 16 when I was told by a friend that sex involved the penis going inside the vagina. I was grossed out and lost respect for my mother. She lets my dad put his disgusting willy inside her body. So there was just so much shame around sexuality. And she says, when I was 6, I was briefly kidnapped. The man pulled down my knickers and touched my vulva, but then he got nervous and took me home. She says, I wasn't very distressed by it, but she'd been out for hours, and when she returned, she got all her mum's anger and panic. And she says, I think that's been the biggest trauma of my life, really. She said, did he touch you? And she said, no. She was too scared to tell her mother that. She said, don't ever talk about it again. So, I mean, as she's older, she realizes just how that would have really tarnished her, and she would have been, that would have made her less sort of valuable to marry, and she would have sort of been tainted by that. So she understood this panic of her mother, but obviously at the time, it was just this story was stuffed back into her. Anyway, she then fell in love. She got married to another Palestinian Muslim, and she said she had a lot of sex that she felt was not very good at all. Anyway, she says, we're divorced now, and I don't live in the Middle East anymore. She has a lover now, and she's having this beautiful sex with him. She said, when he penetrates me, I feel I am not alone. A lot of things drop. I am not my parents' child. I am not my child's parents. All the masks have fallen. I am just there in my incredible nakedness with him. It feels so intimate. I am satisfied. I love loving him. But she can't. She also feels like she can't tell her father. She can't tell anyone she has this lover. She's still. She said, sometimes I think I can't be with someone in an official relationship while my dad is alive. Mm-hmm. But she says, I have a daughter, and I pride myself on how sex and body positive we are in our house. She has had her sexual awakening in an environment that really encouraged it. Sad as it was the divorce that facilitated this. She said, I am resilient, and there is a fighter in me. I have broken a chain, and it is magnificent. And I think it's that sense of this chain that would have gone back for her mum to be like that around sex. What was her mum before her like, you know? And it was just, it's just so imprinted, this ancestral line of fear and shame around sexuality. So for her to have had this hard life, you know, none of that was easy, and leaving her husband wasn't easy, but the fact that she's giving her daughter something different and breaking that pattern. Yeah, and I just found myself so moved by these women and their hard lives.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful story. I have to translate it.
Yeah, sorry.
Es geht um eine Geschichte, von der Lucy sagt, sie hat sie so bewegt, dass sie am Telefon geweint hat, gemeinsam mit der Interviewpartnerin. Das ist eine Frau namens Jasmine, die aus Palästina kommt, eine Muslima. Die sagt, sie ist aufgewachsen eben in einer sehr sexual- und körperfeindlichen Umgebung, ist erst ganz spät tatsächlich über die grundsätzlichen Fakten des heterosexuellen Aktes überhaupt aufgeklärt worden, war dann total angeekelt, dass ihre Mutter sowas mit ihrem Vater tun würde. Und sie sagt, also diese Jasmine, das schlimmste Trauma ihres Lebens war, dass sie als Kind einmal kurz entführt wurde von einem Mann, der sie tatsächlich auch sexuell berührt hat. Aber das Schlimmste war gar nicht das, sondern das Schlimmste war, dass ihre Mutter hinterher nur in Panik war natürlich, aber auch wütend, und sie nur gefragt hat er dich angefasst? Und sie hat sich dann gar nicht getraut zu sagen, was passiert ist, und hat nur Nein gesagt, und die Mutter hat nur gesagt, rede darüber nie. Und dieses Tabuisieren und dieses Schweigen und diese Scham und dieses Nicht-Wissen, was ist da eigentlich, das war für sie schlimmer als dieses Erlebnis selbst. Aber auch sie hat eben jetzt eine sehr powervolle Entwicklung genommen, ist jetzt geschieden von ihrem Mann, hat einen neuen Liebhaber, mit dem sie wohl sehr, sehr erfüllende Sexualität genießen kann, und sie sagt eben, dass sie ihre heranwachsende Tochter jetzt ganz anders erziehen kann und der ganz viel mitgeben und damit eben ein Muster, eine Kette durchbrechen, die immer wieder generationsweise von von Großmüttern zu Müttern zu Töchtern weitergegeben wurde. Und das ist eben auch ein sehr schönes Beispiel für die Geschichten dieses Buches, die eben nie hoffnungslos und nie traurig sind und häufig sowieso sehr lustig und sehr positiv, aber eben auch die schweren Geschichten immer oder sehr häufig wirklich sie sind ehrlich, und sie haben trotzdem diesen Aspekt von es gibt eben, man ist nicht gefangen in seinen eigenen Mustern. We were just talking about motherhood, which also is a good keyword. I myself know that I have 2 children, and I know, and everybody knows, that it can affect your sexuality when you've given birth, and it all changes. And the toddler years, when you think of a bed, you only think of a good night's sleep and nothing else. What I found interesting was another story. You quote Kate from New Zealand, who says that there were these toddler years and they might have been hard, but then afterwards she found a new and really fulfilling sexual relationship with her husband. So she didn't even have to separate and find someone else, but they really reconnected. What do you think in general? What does motherhood do to female sexuality, and what's the secret to finding pleasure again?
Yeah, that was one thing that really struck me when I was writing the book. And one thing I love about the book is it's in it goes in age order. So you do meet these women in their 30s, and you know they're tired and touched out, really. You know, they've got young children. It's really affecting their relationships with their partners. There's resentments, and you're really taken to that moment in time, I think. And I felt very moved because I'm a mum too, and I've been there, and it's so hard. And everything you read says, you'll be back up to, able to have sex in 6 weeks, and actually, you're still in pain, and it's not like that at all. And it has such a big impact on relationships. And I spoke to this actually another woman from England. It's not that many women from England, her son, but and yeah, she says, she's got 2 young children. Her name's Holly in the book. She's 35, and she said, I don't think I've enjoyed sex for a long time. By the end of the day, I've given myself to so many other people. I'm knackered and just thinking about sleep. he will put his arm on me or start stroking my leg, I tense up, wondering what excuse I can come up with. And I just felt so, I think it was quite a privilege for her to share from this place, you know. And she says that, you know, sometimes when she does, you know, she says, penetration has made me emotional to the point of crying. He will penetrate me and I will have tears in my eyes, but I turn away so he doesn't notice them. If he does, I play it down. It's an overwhelming amount of emotion to feel at one time. I realize I really do love him. I feel guilt that he's not my top priority now the kids are here. And it's also mixed with resentment. So you do meet women, just, you know, that's such a particular moment in time, I think, as a mother, you know. And but what, as you said, you meet women in this you know, in this place of worrying about their relationship and this aspect of their life that seems to have completely gone. But then, like you said, you then as the book goes on, you meet somebody who's been through it. And I just think that's so lovely, because quite often you feel like the women are talking to you, but also they're talking to each other. And I really love that. So yeah, so Kate from New Zealand, and she was just so inspiring, because she'd had this and she got upset with you know, that late night rollover initiation. You know, a partner would get into bed at 10 o'clock and maybe touch her bottom, and she didn't like that. And actually what she realized, I'm going to read a bit of hers, if I may. Do you want to translate, and I'll find the bit to carry on?
That's a good idea. Während Lucy Anne jetzt nochmal nach einer Frau sucht, die ich gerade zitiert habe, erzähle ich einmal kurz oder fasse ich zusammen, worum wir gerade gesprochen haben. Und zwar geht es um Mutterschaft, um Geburt und eben die Frage, wie das Muttersein die Sexualität von Frauen verändert. Das kennen vielleicht einige von Ihnen auch, die Kinder haben. Es gibt so eine Zeit im Leben, da, wenn man ein Bett sieht, denkt man an alles andere als an Sex, nur einfach daran, einfach mal wieder durchzuschlafen. Und genauso ging es natürlich einigen Interviewpartnerinnen von Lucy auch. Aber sie sagt eben auch, das Schöne ist, und das fand ich auch beim Lesen tatsächlich sehr inspirierend, diese Frauen, die haben ja, das fängt an mit ganz jungen Frauen, eben 19-Jährigen, und geht so relativ alten Frauen, und dadurch, dass die Altersreihe sozusagen aufsteigend ist, treffen wir diese Frauen in der Mitte ihres Lebens, oder kurz vor der Mitte ihres Lebens, die kleine Kinder haben und die gerade sagen, es kann ich mir gar nicht mehr vorstellen, Sex, und das ist gerade überhaupt nicht mein Thema. Aber wir treffen eben auch die vielleicht Teenager-Kinder, die ältere Kinder haben und die eben teilweise eine sehr glückliche neue Beziehung, eine neue Basis zu ihren Männern gefunden haben. Und eine davon hat Lucy Anne jetzt gerade rausgesucht. Das ist Kate aus Neuseeland. Und ich glaube, wir hören jetzt gleich ein Stückchen aus Kates Geschichte. Yes.
Yeah, this is Kate's picture. Sorry, I'm not showing you all these amazing illustrations. So she says, yes, I've been with my husband for a long time. There's been beautiful growth in our sex life. When our children were young, our sex life was pretty sad. He'd initiate as I was about to go to sleep by pressing his hard cock against me. I'm not into it, I'd say. He'd roll over, but there'd be no cup of tea the next morning. She says, I was conscious that his sex drive was stronger than mine, but only if I was having pedestrian sex. If I was enjoying it, then I was more likely to want it and initiate it. We started making more of an effort, having date nights and turning off Netflix. My husband is turned on by me dressing up in beautiful, ridiculously skimpy, sexy underwear he buys me. It's kind of fun for me, but it won't turn me on. I thought, what do I need? And the answer was heaps of talking. I want to know what's going on in his mind. So I created this game where we put questions in a bowl. We have to answer a question, then we roll a dice, which gives you tasks to do, like taking off an article of clothing or dancing. I was getting that deep intimacy I craved, and he was getting me to gyrate around the room for a while. And this is just massively, you know, now that he might put on some James Brown and do a crazy sexy strip tease, you know. And I think I just love how she stopped and she thought, and I think this is the most powerful thing that happens a few times in the book, and when it does, it's so transformative. But she stopped and went, what do I need? Mm-hmm. You know, to make this good, what do I need? What do I want? Yeah. And you know, Anya, the woman, the German woman I spoke to, was actually one of my, I spoke to her for 6 hours of interviews, actually, over 3 sessions. And it was so hard then to collate it to a small story. But she said at the age of 50, I stopped and I said, what do I want? What are my preferences? Mm-hmm. And there's only one other woman who's Jaya at 25. And she said, what do I want was the most freeing, mm-hmm. Question to ask. And I think that's what's so powerful. And I think when women are so socialized to please men, quite often we don't ask. And I love it. So when the women in the book have, it's just wonderful and creative what answers they get.
Absolutely. Lucy sagt, eine der befreiendsten Fragen für viele Frauen, für viele ihrer Interviewpartnerinnen war, was will ich eigentlich? Was sind meine Bedürfnisse? Was ist meine Sexualität? Und nicht die Frage, wie gefalle ich meinem Partner? Und das war etwas, was in der Geschichte, aus der sie gerade gelesen hat, auch eine große Rolle spielt. Eine Frau, eine Mutter in einer okayen Ehe mit einem Sexleben, das eher darin bestand, dass sie ihn abgewehrt hat, bis sie dann irgendwann auf eine sehr spielerische Art und Weise über so ein kleines, so ein Frage- und Antwortspiel über Zettelchen, die sie in eine Box getan haben, wo sie sich dann gegenseitig Dinge gefragt haben oder komische Aufgaben kriegten, sie sollten plötzlich voneinander tanzen oder so, einfach rausgefunden haben auf eine sehr spielerische Art und Weise, oder sie für sich auch rausgefunden hat, was will ich eigentlich? Und Lucy sagt auch, das war was sie sehr beeindruckt hat in einem Gespräch mit einer deutschen Interviewpartnerin, Anja, die auch irgendwann gesagt hat, ich habe einfach mal alles weggewischt, was ich immer dachte, was sein sollte im Bett und mit Männern, und ich habe mich dann irgendwann gefragt, was will ich eigentlich, und das war für mich so unglaublich befreiend. Talking of things that free minds, free people, I said before I wanted to go back to the topic of queerness. You already mentioned you had one trans person, one trans woman, and one person who defines themselves, in English you can say this beautiful pronoun, we can't in German, who defines themselves as non-binary. Is it, I was wondering, is it like when you talk to those persons, is it very, very different, or is it rather that you talk to them and then think, okay, they might have different bodies and different physical experiences, but maybe there is still something that unites us sexually in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for all of us, it's such a delicate, intimate, vulnerable place, and I think that really does unite us. And I think it's a sensitive place. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting talking to Cal and Jennifer, because they were very, what was so wonderful to talk to is because they have explored this aspect of themselves. They have explored this. They have, and I think communities, I would say trans communities, non-binary communities, I think I think there probably is this is an aspect that is discussed, and so they were very able to be very articulate about this aspect of themselves, whereas some of the other women I spoke to, this might have been the first conversation they'd had of this kind. Mm-hmm. I know some women were like, oh my goodness, I've never said this, I've never thought this. Mm-hmm. I've never thought this stuff. So I feel that we're all united by being bodies capable of sensation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and wanting to experience love and connection and sensation, and I think that unites us all. Yeah.
Ich habe Lucy eben gefragt, wie ihre Gespräche denn waren mit den beiden Menschen, die in diesem Buch vorkommen. Das eine ist eine Person, die sich als nicht-binär, also nicht den üblichen Geschlechtern Mann-Frau zugehörig fühlt. Und das andere ist eine Transfrau, also sprich ein Mensch in einem männlichen Körper geboren, sich diesem Geschlecht aber nicht zugehörig fühlend, die sich als Frau definiert. Und ich habe Lucy gefragt, ist das denn, das kann man sich ja schwer vorstellen, wenn man sozusagen im eigenen biologischen Geschlecht geboren ist, sich wohlfühlt, selbst heterosexuell ist, wie sich das anfühlen mag. Und ob man darüber überhaupt ein Gespräch, wie man darüber überhaupt sprechen kann. Und dann sagte sie, naja, wir sind ja gar nicht, insofern sind wir nicht so verschieden, als dass es für uns alle ein verletzlicher, ein sensibler Bereich in unserem Leben ist, dass wir alle Wesen sind, die sich nach Berührung, nach Liebe, nach Verbindung sehnen, auch auf einer körperlichen Ebene. Und gleichzeitig sagt sie, es ist eben schon so, dass in diesen Trans-Communities Körper, Sexualität eher ein Thema ist, über das man auch spricht, sich auseinandersetzt, schlicht, weil einem gar nichts anderes übrig bleibt, weil es eben nicht so selbstverständlich ist. Und das ist sogar ein Vorteil dieser Menschen, kann es sein natürlich, im Gegensatz zu heterosexuellen Frauen, von denen einige zu ihr auch sagten, ja, ich habe darüber überhaupt noch nie so gesprochen, nachgedacht, ich habe das gar nicht für mich reflektiert, weil das natürlich auch eine gewisse Selbstverständlichkeit mit sich bringt, die aber auch dazu führt, dass man vielleicht gar nicht so richtig oder Frau gar nicht so richtig weiß, was sie eigentlich will und was sie eigentlich braucht. Talking about bodies, one more thing which really struck me is that for me, I can say I grew up in a world where I thought, okay, sex is something for good-looking, thin, young, and able-bodied people. And now, for some years, we have talked about a keyword like body positivity, which basically means that everybody can be beautiful and everybody can experience lust, and you shouldn't wait until you have your ideal body shape, whatever that might be, until you dare to have good sex. So in which way did this topic come into your book?
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck, and it reminded me of myself in my 20s, but just for quite a lot of the younger women, how much because obviously we spoke about what do you think about when you're having sex, and a lot of those thoughts are, do I look okay? Am I, do I smell, a fear and a shame and a worry about the body. And then what I think is great, because I think actually what you say, I think we somehow have this weird thing where we only feel it's okay for the young, attractive people to talk about sex. And it's not a domain of other people in a way. Yeah, and actually what is so brilliant, I think, about the book is how older people are, it really is. I think the good sex tends to start kicking in the women I talk to in the 40s. Mm-hmm. And I really love that. And I love how, as a woman, Odile, who I spoke to from the Netherlands, who I think is 56, and she says, bad sex is just not worth it anymore. Why the fuck bother? And I just love that. Whereas there's a lot more, feeling proud about this aspect. And I think that the phrase "fuck it" gets louder as the women get older. So they do feel more positive about their body and their sexuality. Yes. But I think, I think we live in a funny time at the moment. I think in many ways Instagram is terrible, and a lot of people compare themselves to people they see on Instagram, and but then also there's some for body positivity, there's some just incredible people celebrating being sexual, having disabilities, being sexual, and sexual women in all shapes and sizes. And I think that, so it's that double-edged thing, isn't it? There's great work going on, and then there's also things that feel quite damaging.
And it's so contradictory, because on the other hand you have porn, which might destroy or might not destroy intimacy, and on the other hand might maybe give people interesting ideas.
Absolutely.
Also wir haben gerade über das Thema Körper nochmal gesprochen, nochmal unter einem anderen Aspekt. Das ist ja in den letzten Jahren viel, dieses Stichwort Body Positivity, auch in Deutschland geht durch die Medien, was im Grunde ja nichts anderes heißt, als jeder Körper ist auf seine Weise schön, aber eben auch lustbesetzt, und man sollte sich eigentlich in jedem Körper wohlfühlen können, und es sollte kein Privileg von jungen, schlanken, schönen Menschen sein, guten Sex zu haben oder über Sex zu sprechen. Und auch das sieht man tatsächlich sehr an der Auswahl, die Lucy für ihr Buch getroffen hat, wo sie sagt, gerade die etwas älteren Frauen, gerade die in den 40ern oder auch 50ern, für die wird Sex nochmal ein großes Thema, gerade weil sie loslassen können, diese ewige Angst, vielleicht nicht gut auszusehen oder komisch zu riechen oder was auch immer, sondern einfach viel mehr mit sich im Reinen sein können. Und sie sagt halt auch, was ich auch bestätigen würde, ist, das Internet ist auch ein komischer Ort, was eben einerseits viele fragwürdige Role Models hervorbringt, viele tausendfach gefotoshoppte Bilder von schönen Menschen und man hat das Gefühl, so sehe ich ja nie aus und wer soll mich denn attraktiv finden? Und auf der anderen Seite findet man gerade auch auf Instagram Menschen in allen Körperformen, allen Altersstufen, die sich einfach gut finden und die eben auch Bilder sozusagen, Rollenvorbilder sein können, die es früher in der Form nicht gab. Genauso die Diskussion um Pornografie, die wir ja immer wieder führen. Zerstört es die Intimität, wenn pornografische Bilder uns den Sex kaputt machen, oder ist es eher auch eine Inspiration, vielleicht neue Dinge auszuprobieren? Und irgendwo zwischen diesen Widersprüchen, mit denen wir in unserer medialen Welt ja allen leben, navigiert dieses Buch auf eine wunderbare Weise durch. Yeah, before I ask you some last questions, I would like to encourage the audience. Liebe Leute, ihr könnt hier immer noch Fragen stellen. Wir haben noch so 10 Minuten. Wir haben hier eine Frage von Sabine, die ich gerne ganz am Ende stellen würde, weil ich die auch so interessant finde. Aber wenn noch mehr Leute von euch Dinge wissen wollen von Lucy, an die ich noch gar nicht gedacht habe, bitte feel free to write your questions in German or in English, auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch, in das kleine Textfeld unter dem Videofenster. Ansonsten frage ich jetzt noch ein paar Sachen. Lucy, you said, or maybe I mentioned it in the introduction, or you did, that you, before this book, you wrote a memoir about your own sexual experience. So you're quite open and quite frank with the topic yourself. What was it what you learned personally from talking to all those different women? Was there any insight which you thought, okay, maybe I've been there, but I've never thought that? What was your most impressive insight from all those talks?
Yeah, I don't think I learned anything, I suppose, new, but I think just the power of hearing these women so intimately and having these conversations has moved me and shaped me and changed my life on quite a deep level. I think it's really cemented, like I knew, because I'd explored my own sexuality, just how powerful it is to explore your own sexuality, and how transformative it can be. And I think what kept happening and what I'm so pleased about is so many of the conversations I had with women were like the women at the end said, oh my gosh, I didn't know I needed to have that conversation, or that felt gently therapeutic, or there was a sense of kind of wonder, about a sense of wonder, like you were in wonder at just how powerful it is to have these conversations. And I think for the women, being able to talk to a stranger about this intimate aspect of themselves, was really powerful. And it was again great to meet the women when the book came out and to get in contact again, and just sometimes check in with the women about how their journeys have been. And for many of them, their lives are changed, and it had been quite a powerful event just speaking about their sexuality. And so I think for me, really cemented this knowing of just how powerful it is right now. You mentioned Me Too. This book feels very post Me Too, because I do think it, so more able to share these stories that historically have been pushed back inside us, or it's not been safe to. So I think creating safe spaces to have these conversations, and then having beautiful editors and beautiful people in publishing to publish them so sensitively, an artist responding. I just think there's something deeply quite healing about that. So I think that's what's touched me. So, and I think it's definitely informing the book I'm writing now, and it will probably inform everything I do from here on.
Yeah. Before we come to the artwork work, I tried to sum this up a little for the audience. Ich habe Lucy angefragt, sie hat ja vorher, das haben wir vorhin, glaube ich, erwähnt, bevor dieses Buch erschien, hat sie ein Buch über ihre eigene sexuelle Reise geschrieben und veröffentlicht in England. Und ich wollte gerne von ihr wissen, ob denn jetzt dieses Buch ihr nochmal was Neues beigebracht hat, auch über sich selber. Und sie sagte, ja, es war jetzt nicht so, dass sie etwas komplett Neues gelernt hatte, aber es war für sie einfach immer wieder sehr berührend zu sehen, was es mit Menschen macht, wenn sie sich öffnen, wenn sie bereit sind, auch in ihre eigenen Abgründe auch zu gucken, aber eben auch nach vorwärts zu gucken, eigene Erinnerungen nochmal einzuordnen. Und das hat für viele einfach eine sehr heilende, eine kathartische Wirkung, möchte man fast sagen. Und da dabei sein zu dürfen, das hat natürlich auch was sehr, sehr Kraftvolles für einen selber. Und das hat sie einfach sehr bestätigt darin, wie wichtig es ist, diese Räume zu haben, diese Safe Spaces. Das kann ein Gespräch sein, das kann im Privaten sein, das kann eben auch so ein Buch sein als Forum, um diese Erfahrungen miteinander zu teilen und dadurch einfach auch das Gefühl zu haben, nicht allein zu sein, so unterschiedlich unsere Erfahrungen sein mögen. And then again, I'd like to ask about the illustrations. You already showed us some. Who came up with this great idea to have this very special artwork? Who chose the illustrators? And is there maybe a favorite? Is there? This is actually a question from the audience. Sabine wanted to know if you have illustration.
Again, this is Katie Folane. She wanted this to be an illustrated book. So she researched the artists, and again, it's an international feel and a diverse feel of the artists, and I think it's the thing that makes it so exquisite to see all these artists. Because I'd write the stories, then it would go to the artist, so the artist would then be responding to the stories. So you had a woman sharing her story, and then it being collated, and then so it was a kind of journey. It was this amazing collaborative journey, and I just think there's something. I've never seen a book that's just got so many illustrations that, represent female sexuality. So it's just, and it's not, images of women, we've seen in our lifetime so many images of women, performative images of women to turn men on, but to have these images just like, exploring female sexuality, I just think it's like, unheard of in my life that I've seen. So I adore it. So Katie spent a lot of time researching the artists, and it's been beautiful seeing them come in and getting very excited about them.
Es war also wieder ihre englische Verlegerin, die auf die Idee kam. Ich habe sie jetzt gerade nochmal nach der Optik, nach diesen schönen Zeichnungen und Illustrationen gefragt. Jede dieser 51 Geschichten hat eben tatsächlich eine eigene Illustration, und die sind alle in sehr unterschiedlichen Stil gehalten. Auch das war wieder eine Idee, sagt Lucy, ihrer wunderbaren Verlegerin in Großbritannien. Und das sind, wir sagten es ja vorhin schon, größtenteils weibliche, aber eben auch männliche oder auch sich anders definierende Künstlerinnen und Künstler, die diese Illustrationen angefertigt haben, und zwar nachdem sie die Geschichten bekommen haben. Also wirklich auf die Geschichten hin haben sie sich inspirieren lassen, was aber jetzt auch nicht bedeutet, dass diese Geschichten immer 1:1 jetzt einfach illustriert und umgesetzt sind, sondern es sind sehr, sehr künstlerische, sehr fantasievolle, sehr, sehr witzige Illustrationen teilweise. Lucy, did you answer the question?
It's such a terrible question. I can't believe it. I've got a few favorites that I will share.
Zeigt uns jetzt gleich nochmal.
Okay, so I think, so this is one of them. And that's the illustration and I think what I love about this, so this is an illustration, Kim Thompson did the illustration, Kimatron on Instagram, but she, what I love is this is a story of Wambu from Kenya, and it's a story that you mentioned. It's about the woman who was, she was cut as a 13-year-old and had such a hard life, and then had restorative surgery. And she says, it was a rebirth, an instant shift. Like my sexuality was handed back to me in an envelope. And what she now has is just this amazing relationship with her body and with her sexuality. And I just love how this image just, just really shows this. I adore it. Yeah. And then I've got a few, but I can't possibly pick a favorite. It's a very hard question.
Yeah. First, and then you can look another up if you want to.
Yeah, you can do it.
Ich hatte noch mal gefragt, hat sie einen Liebling bei den Illustrationen? Das ist natürlich schwer zu beantworten, weil ich kann schon verstehen, dass sie in alle möglichen Illustrationen ganz verliebt war. Unter anderem in die sie gerade gezeigt hat. Die illustriert diese eigentlich ja sehr traurige Geschichte einer Frau aus Kenia, die als kleines Mädchen sexuell verstümmelt wurde und dann aber eben das Gott sei Dank wieder hergestellt werden konnte. Und die in der Geschichte sagt, es war wie, wenn mir jemand meine Sexualität in einem Briefumschlag zurückgeben würde und da war sie wieder. Und das ist eben die Art und Weise, wie die Künstlerin eine Möglichkeit gefunden hat, das auszudrücken.
I really love this one as well. And this was the first illustration I think that we received from any of the artists, and I was like, oh my God, I love it so much. And again, like she says, this was like this amazing woman, Rehana, and she was really in this amazing relationship with this lover who was just transporting her. And she said, oh, I said to him the other night, sometimes when you kiss me, you put me in an altered state. Within 20 seconds, my whole being is softened and I'm out of my body as well as in my body. And I just love how that really just shows her in this altered state. Yeah, so I love that one too.
Eine andere Zeichnung, die eben eine Art Körperzustand illustriert, wo eine Frau sagt, sie fühlt sich sozusagen wenn sie mit ihrem Liebsten schläft, dann ist es wie eine Art, gleichzeitig mehr in ihrem Körper zu sein, aber auch außerhalb ihres Körpers. Und das hat auch wieder hier eine Illustratorin ganz kongenial umgesetzt. Yeah, I know we could talk for ages and for hours. And
I could do all the illustrations as well, so I'll stop.
and so on. But I think the time is running out, and I can only recommend everyone here to read that book. It might change your life, and you'll definitely have a lot to think about and a lot of fun and a lot of to share and to relate to. So the last question, actually, this one,
so beautiful,
is from Sabine, which also came to my mind, is will there be some kind of sequel? Maybe you could talk to 51 men from all around the world and ask them about all their intimate thoughts and feelings. I'd be thrilled to read it.
Yes, well, I really want to write a men's book. Yes, so my heart really wants to write a men's book. And I actually, because all the way through, I was thinking, gosh, I really feel like I'd like to hear from men. And I did a few interviews with men because I was thinking, gosh, it definitely felt right for me to do the women's book because I've explored my own sexuality. I felt very comfortable talking. And I thought, I don't know whether this is my book to do with a men's book because I don't have that experience of being around. But I thought I'll try and do a few interviews, and I did a few interviews and wrote them up, and I think they're incredible. And I think that actually that a men's book could be even more taboo breaking than the women's book because we don't so often hear these stories from men about what they're feeling and about this sort of what is quite a vulnerable, intimate aspect of themselves. And so for me, I really would love to do it. And I felt so humbled by the way the men shared with me. But Quercus, who published this book, they've not said yes to it. So for now, I don't think so. Maybe it wants to come out in Germany before England, the German publisher, was it? Because I think it could be really remarkable. And it's so interesting how many people have said that. And also quite a lot of particularly the younger women in the book are what they're thinking about when they're having sex is wondering what he's thinking. Mm-hmm. So I love the fact that we'd have, here a women's book and a men's book. Yeah, I think it could be really good.
auf die Frage, ob jetzt dann nicht der nächste logische Schritt wäre, ein Buch zu machen, in dem man 51 Männer interviewt, die auf eine ähnliche Art und Weise über ihre Sexualität sprechen, sagt Lucy Anne, ja, absolut. Das wäre ein absoluter Traum, das zu machen, obwohl sie gleichzeitig auch sagt, sie hat anfangs gezögert bei der Idee, weil sie als Frau natürlich nicht dieselbe Erfahrung hat wie ein Mann. Gleichzeitig sagt sie, das ist eine Frage, die auch viele Frauen interessiert und die gleichzeitig gewissermaßen eben auch ein Tabu brechen würde, weil Männer es ja vielleicht auch nicht so gewohnt sind, auf diese Art und Weise über sich selbst und ihre Erfahrungen zu sprechen. Aber ihr englischer Verlag hat bisher noch nicht Ja gesagt. Also das wäre vielleicht der Moment, wo der deutsche Verlag sagen könnte, ja, unbedingt, wir wollen das und machen es als Erste. Wir gehen mit gutem Beispiel voran. I think I'm very sorry about that, but I think this is the point where we have to say goodbye. So first of all, I really want to thank you for being so frank and for taking your time and for telling us so much about your personal experience and the experience as an author. And I wish you a lot of luck and interested readers from all walks of life and all sexes and all genders and all ages, because it's really worth it. It was really good talking to you. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
An dieser Stelle natürlich auch an Sie da draußen nochmal ganz herzlichen Dank, dass Sie uns heute Abend begleitet haben. Vielen Dank im Namen des Heine Hardcore Verlages, dass Sie bei unserer Veranstaltung zu Gast waren. Ich hoffe, Sie haben es ähnlich genossen wie ich, mit dieser sehr inspirierenden Person zu sprechen. Und wenn Sie mehr wissen wollen, also Sie wissen ja, wo Sie Bücher kriegen. Und ich verspreche Ihnen, da haben Sie viel davon in jeder Hinsicht. Es gibt Ihnen zu denken, es gibt Ihnen zu schmunzeln, es gibt Ihnen aber auch zu mitfühlen, es gibt Ihnen was zum Lernen über sich selber und über Menschen, die Sie kennen. Also für mich war es eine tolle Erfahrung. Und ich wünsche Ihnen allen einen wunderbaren Abend. I wish you all a very pleasant and beautiful evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.